Welcome back to Season 5 of the True Blue Conversations podcast with your host, Adam Blum. Podcasters, Adam's book, Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog, is now available for pre-order. Head on over to Booktopia, Dimmicks and Big Sky Publishing to pre-order your copy and be one of the first to read Adam's story of surviving to thriving and how he escaped the cycle of being an easy target. Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog by Adam Blum. Coming soon. G'day podcasters. Before we get underway with True Blue Conversations, just wanted to give a huge shout out to our friend and sponsor, the Warrior U podcast, hosted by Bram Connolly. Bram is a former Special Forces commander, best-selling author, popular podcast host, and human optimization pioneer. He has an authentic style and the unique ability to not only motivate, but also take people on a journey of self-discovery. Through the Warrior U podcast, Bram interviews guests in a bid to explore all things human optimization, resilience, leadership, and coffee. His book, The Commando Way, a Special Forces Commander's Lessons for Life, Leadership and Success, is available now on amazon.com.au. So from Adam Blum and all of us here at True Blue Conversations, a big shout out to the Warrior U podcast, Bram Connolly, and his new book, The Commando Way, out now. Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran-owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Blum. Today's special guest, well, I'll go through her bio in a minute, and she's a lady who I owe so much to and has helped me with my own personal journey and helped me with a beautiful testimonial for my upcoming book, Easy Target. And this lady's done it all. She's a TV superstar. She has represented Australia in swimming, and she's also one of the Beyond Blue directors, and her name is Johanna Griggs. So welcome to the show, Jo. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations.
Thank you. It's an honour to be here, to be perfectly honest.
I'm sitting across from you, and there's moments in my pod, we've spoken off air, Jo, and I sit here and think 4 years ago when I started this that I'd be sitting across from you. It's actually a pinch myself moment, and I'm really honoured to have you on. So before we get into who you are and the TV and the people who know you from Better Homes and Gardens and hosting Olympics, and I want to go back to a young Johanna Griggs. And can you tell us a little bit about you growing up, what you were like at school? Do you have any brothers and sisters, and what were your hobbies?
2 elder sisters, younger brother. He always says he has 4 mothers. All incredibly hyperactive. I think I can appreciate now, as we're older, that the reason that our parents were amazing, putting us into 1,000 sports, was with the goal of exhausting us. And they needed to. Like, I'm still notoriously hyperactive and still get into a lot of trouble for how quickly I speak and the days that I can hardly contain my energy levels. And I think I'm probably doing better than my brother. These days he would 100% be diagnosed with ADHD.
Yep. I know that.
It's amazing when you actually see it's definitely in all of us. And I guess the way that our parents did it was lots of outdoors and lots of burning off energy and lots of sport. And so we literally played 1,000 different sports. learn how to swim because we were either spending time out in the country or in the beaches, and so our parents were like, it doesn't matter whether you're near a dam, a river or a beach, you need to know how to be safe, and you need to know how to do it without us having to be there as hover parents, because they were both working full time. And Mum, she was a teacher and she was always studying as well. Like, I don't know how she actually fit it all in. We often talk about it now when the siblings are together. We're just like, how did they just make everything be so accessible? But it was because they just worked round the clock to do it.
It seems to be that generation, Joe. Like my parents were the same, that they just seemed to just make it happen, and that, like my brother and I both had ADHD and we both struggled, and Mum and Dad just found a way to just, they would find the money to get us extra help.
Yep.
And I don't know how they did what, like your parents, just seemed to fit it in, sport, seeing family and just working. I don't know how they did it.
Logistics of driving you everywhere and doing all that sort of stuff. And all of us feeling like now as adults that we didn't really miss out on anything, that there wasn't any angst that we were kind of had something that we couldn't do, which I think these days is probably a little bit more restrictive just because of the cost of a lot of those things. I mean, we all joke, you look back, but you do feel like there were simpler times and things were a bit more accessible, and even you just have to look at how many basketball courts, how many tennis courts were available back then compared to what is available now. So we were pretty fortunate with our upbringing that we were able to do a lot of things, but we also we joke about it often with Mum that it was definitely to benefit her too, so that she could put us to bed at some point, because we were a pretty wild old bunch.
So most people, as I said, know you, Joe, as a TV host, but before your life on TV, you represented Australia in swimming. So let's talk about, you mentioned that you're swimming at a young age, but when did swimming when did you realise that you were actually a good swimmer, and when did you get onto the Australian team?
Well, I knew I was a decent swimmer because I could certainly make the finals of events and go through to state and things like that through school. But it wasn't until I actually went to a swimming meet with another swimming family, and I think that was because Mum and Dad were so busy that those extra things, you didn't always get to go to those things because they were still juggling the other three kids and making sure it was all balanced between them. So I ended up going to a big meet with another swimming family and did really well. And there were talent scouts there, coaches that came up and spoke to Mum, and they're like, how much does she train? And Mum's like, oh, well, one afternoon a week. And they're like, she needs to train more than that. And she's like, yes, but we've got 4 kids. And so it's actually about our family unit. And so then I started going a couple of days a week, and then at 13 they came again and spoke to Mum and said, we really think she needs to do a bit more. And Mum was like, well, that's great for you, but I've got all the other kids to think of. And so by 14 I then went from only a couple of sessions a week to sort of 6 days a week training, 11 sessions a week, and was immediately picked for states and then Australian team from that point. So I think my first Australian team, I think I was 15, because we were the first Australian team to go into China, and which was pretty amazing to see China back then, and the amount of times that I've had to go back there for work since, and in the lead up to the Beijing Olympics and the Beijing Winter Olympics last year. You look at it and you go, to see it before it really had opened up was quite amazing. But the only downside to all of that, because once I made that team, that was it. I was off pretty much the whole time, because we're at the end of an era where we had the old school coaching, the old school mentality towards coaching, which was very much to overtrain. But we also had the mentality that to be good enough, Australia had a bit of a chip on its shoulder. You had to be overseas the whole time. Whereas now everyone comes out to Australia. We've got the coaches, we've got the athletes, we've got amazing facilities, and they know that, and they don't feel like they have to prove themselves as much. But back then we were away a lot, so as a result, I didn't actually have a lot of schooling, which. If you can count all of your years of schooling in a couple of months, it's not great.
So there's a thing there for kids. School is not quite nowadays.
No, it's very. I mean, I spend my life just constantly trying to continue to learn, because I have such a chip on my shoulder about the fact I didn't finish school, and I've feel very lucky with the things I've been able to do that I actually can do that.
So for you, obviously, when you're away, 15's very trusting of your parents to go, go, because you're a mum and a grandmother now, which that's crazy, Joe. You're a grandmother, but it's for you now, looking with your boys,
Yeah.
would you have sent them away at
No,
15?
I've had that conversation with my mum a million times. Like, really, from 14, I was away on trips from that point, 15 from the Australian team, and they were incredibly trusting. I don't know if I would have felt comfortable doing that, but I think they knew that I had a real desire, and I was one of the lucky ones that had good people around me. There were some pretty dubious characters in that world back then. I was really fortunate my coach was not one of those people. He was absolutely fantastic, and so when I could travel with him, I know they felt complete confidence in that. And it comes down to like team managers. If you scored a good team manager and things like that, that made the world of difference. So was very young. Eyes opened up to a lot of things probably before they should have, just because you're around people who are a lot older doing adult things.
Yep.
And so it was definitely, I say to people, it was definitely an education.
So we go forward to the Commonwealth Games in 1990. What do you remember about these games? And this was at a time like you were part of the original superstars of today, really, weren't you?
Like they was a pretty golden team back then. And Hayley Lewis was winning numerous 5 gold medals as a 15-year-old. She was the youngest. I was the second youngest in the team. We had all those great 1500 swimmers that were coming through. You had Glenn Houseman and Kieran Perkins, and transitioning over to Grant Hackett. You had Nicole Livingston, who was absolutely amazing, and then there were lists of 1,000 of them. But I would say I wasn't the best swimmer on the team by anything, but I remember those games incredibly fondly because I just swam so much better than I was expected to make the final. Then I took a big chunk of time off from the final to get a bronze medal at just turned 16. It was amazing, and I had my mum, my dad, some family friends over. I think my brother was there, so just remember family as well actually being a part of it, and it was just more than anything, it was just fun. Like you go into a food hall for the first time as a 16-year-old, and you can get, it's the size of a football field, and you can get any meal from any cuisine, and there's a whole wall that's just ice cream and lollies, and you're thinking that has to wait till after you're swimming, but you're just like it was such an eye opener, but just such a great experience.
So for you, what was it like at such a young age? Everyone talks, and I had Curtis McGrath on the podcast. I've had
outstanding human
I've
being.
had Ali Bull as well.
Yeah,
and,
great.
And they say to me, there's nothing better than wearing the green and gold. And what was that like for you?
Oh, look, it was amazing, and it's the team mentality that they really foster, the pride in one, understanding what it means to represent your country. You realise there's a lot of people who would love to have that opportunity who never get that opportunity, but also what it stands for, what the team mentality is like, how everyone is there for each other. You actually feel like you're part of something, and I think most of us every single day of our lives like to feel like you're part of something, and part of something really good and positive.
Absolutely. And for you mentioned that you won a bronze medal in the 100-metre backstroke.
Yeah.
And so have you still got that medal today?
I keep my bronze medal from the Com Games, my silver medal from the 91 World Champs, my Australian sport medal, and now things I got my AM and my honorary doctorate, but I keep those things. But the rest of it, no, I've let it all go, which killed my husband. He was like, "What?" He keeps his football trophies, but I think it's because I'm one of those lucky people. I get a lot of positive feedback and adulation just because of the work that I do, but it's not how I measure myself. So I just keep the ones that were really significant.
I think it's a good point you touch on there, Joe, is that the materialistic things, they're only materialistic.
Yeah.
Like you don't. It's like we were talking off air. Is if your family and your friends, that's the value, and if they say you're doing a great thing or you're doing a great job,
they don't talk to me about my swimming career.
Because most of the people go, no, you, because I've heard you on other podcasts go, I don't want to. No, what? Oh yeah.
I just think it's hilarious if anyone remembers all those times. I'm like, wow, how good your memory.
And this is, I actually was born 2 years after this, Joe. So when you remember, so there you go. So, and I mean, it was something that your kids said. They came home one day and said to you, "Mum, you're a swimmer. What?" Like, and that
because you're mum. Like to them, you're just a mum, and we've worked really hard to. I guess, live our life by certain rules. I don't go to events. I don't, unless there's a really significant reason for going to it. I don't go accept freebies. I don't, if something gets sent to me and I send it back and it comes back to me again, I just send a note and say, look, I'll share it with the office. Thank you. I don't do gifts. It's because I feel a bit funny about that because it helps keep my life completely uncomplicated is probably the best way to describe it. And with our kids growing up, it was like we didn't do anything publicly with them since they were tiny little babies so that they actually had a chance to make mistakes and go through school, which can be a really incredibly tough time and certainly can be a challenging time for kids that have, high-profile parents and they were able to make mistakes and no one knew about it. So we could close the door and at home you're just mum and they think you're a good mum, a terrible mum, a mean mum, one with too many rules, all the things the boys have said over the years. But now they've reached this great age where they're at now. They're young men and they're just incredibly grateful for the upbringing they had.
And I think another great point you touch on too is we've all been there as young.
100%.
I've been there with my mum and gone, I hate you.
100%.
And Joe, you've read my book and you've read the notes, the sorry notes that I wrote to my mum. And I think now I'm at an age where, and people used to call me a mummy's boy, and I'm proud of it because
100%.
now I ring my mum every day.
Yeah.
And she's just that reassurance is there. And I know one day she's not going to be there, and that was my brother said, why do you ring mum every day? And I said, because one day she's not going to be here. And I think when you're going through your teens and your early 20s, it's like, I don't want to be seen with mum and dad. And now I love spending time. The more time I can spend with my parents, the better. Yeah.
Well, we're fortunate. We've got that relationship with the boys and with my stepkids, Frank and So, from actually Gary's previous relationship before me. And I mean, there's a great saying. It says, a mother is only as happy as her unhappiest child. And I think that's very true. Yeah. And but it's also really fun when they become adults and your relationship shifts from you having to I guess, discipline and guide. And our boys, they say to us all the time, we were so naughty. And they say, we don't even know why we were. Like, you gave us this great life, you and Todd, and we were still little rats. And they just go, look, we're really sorry. I'm like, it's great you've had that self-reflection. We kind of wish that self-reflection had come between the ages of about 15 and 21. But anyhow, we're happy to accept it now. And they're just so much fun to hang out with. So some of our favourite times are just hanging out with them as adults.
And we'll get to you being a grandmother a little bit later, and I think that's in the sense my mum's just recently done that as well, and it's a different. She said it's a different love.
Totally.
It's
you've got time. You're not the one who has to discipline.
Yeah.
And like for Todd and I, having little Jaxie, who he's 5, turns 6 in March of next year, and starts school, and he has just brought so much joy and love into our lives, which we weren't lacking. Like, we have so much love and so many great people in our lives, but it's just a totally different thing. And Todd and I, we couldn't have children, and so to watch him be this amazing grandfather and how much joy he gets out of it is just one of the great joys of my life, was watching that. But I mean, he's a classic example. When we would see Jackson in the mornings that he sleeps over, he comes up. Todd will spoil him rotten with a treat within about the first 10 minutes of him being awake. And I'm thinking, we would never have done that with our kid, like with the boys growing up. But he's just like, we don't make the rules. We break the rules. And it is a totally different mindset and a time of your life as well.
So obviously you're not grandma. Are you?
I'm Nana.
You're Nana.
I'm Nana.
And what's Todd?
He's Pepe. So he wanted to be called Poppy. Yep. And Jack's, being a typical little boy, called him Poo Poo, then Pee Pee, and then one day just went Pepe. And he says it like he's like some little throwback Italian kid where he's got this real Pepe. And we were laughing, actually, we're talking about it on the weekend. He's going to be Pepe forever if we're fortunate enough to have any more grandchildren, which we hope we have loads, because it makes you a really bad parent, because you just tell your kids to go out and procreate. But literally, like, he's going to be Pepe forever. Like, it just suits him, it sticks, and it's funny how they have their own little way of working out what it's going to be.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I know Todd's because I've met Todd, and he's just a larrikin, just an absolute.
He loves life, Toddy, and he has the best time wherever you go, and he's fun to live with because he even if there's something that's really stressful or you're going through something and you're offloading, he just has this uncanny ability to be able to just make you giggle. And when he came into my life, the boys were quite young, and I was so used to doing everything myself, and I'd have everything just so mapped out, and it was the only way I could keep on top of everything that I was doing work-wise and life-wise. Yeah. And so if I was going away on a trip, I'd just like go, right, so this. And he'd look at me and go, right. And he'd just smile and be like, what are you smiling at? He's like, I'm just wondering if that's how a control freak would do it. Like, I wonder how it would look if that person actually considered there was another person in this relationship. And I'd just it would stop me in my tracks, and I'd be like, I'm so sorry. I've just gone into autopilot. And he'd be like, it's okay. How about we try it like this? How about you just go away and I'll take care of that? And it was just like, and it just makes you giggle because it's like, he was 100% correct. I would just fall back into those habits, and as opposed to get mad or frustrated, he just has a great ability to disarm me with a smile and a giggle, and off you go again.
But I think too, it's like you were so used to doing it on your own, and you do, like you say, habits are...
You've got to work to break those habits.
100%, and they're hard habits, and I've been through it myself. It's so, like when I blew out to 166 kilos, it was, I had to stop the habit of putting food in my mouth, and it was a habit.
It requires discipline, and it requires you to think about it.
Exactly.
And, he's brought so many amazing positive things into our lives. Because he'd never been around really anyone with young kids. He only had one friend that had 2 young kids before. So for him, it was like we both had to really adjust how we had lived up until that point.
Yeah,
but he's amazing. Like he's extraordinary.
Yeah, amazing, funny, and just
he's mad. He's quite mad, which I like as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before we move on to, we'll talk. I want to talk about chronic fatigue syndrome, but I just want to highlight, because I know you won't. So you were number 1 in the world 4 times.
Yeah.
And you broke the 30 seconds for the first time, and you won as you mentioned, you won your silver medal at
World Champs.
Yeah, World Champs. So Joe, you were quite you play it down, but
I really wasn't. When you actually look at the people that I swam with who were doing it, like if you could run through their accolades, you'd be there for half an hour just running through what they did. I wasn't the greatest swimmer on the team, but I'm very comfortable that I was a decent swimmer. I look at the time that Kaylee McEwen's doing for a 50-metre backstroke now, and it's almost embarrassing to say how proud you were to break 30 seconds when you look at what she can do it in now. But it's all it's all relevant. It's all relevant to the time, and I'm not one of those people who looks back with swimming with angst. It was a great sport. I had great friendships, and I loved training, so I didn't find the training to be a drain. Like I was at a club that was a really fantastic and supportive club, so I only look back with positive feelings about swimming, whereas there are lots of people that I swam with that went through a lot more and who don't have that same kind of sense of just going, it was a great part of my life, but I was also very ready to leave it when the end came.
And for you, what I'm getting from that is it sort of gave you discipline for the rest of your life, and how you've gone forward with your life. Every
single life skill that I used every single day and have used for 31 years in media, and I was lucky that I could go straight into media. Literally the day after I announced my retirement, I had 3 network contract offers. I think, like everything, discipline from learning how to get good sleep, good discipline with your food and alcohol, discipline with your time management, discipline with how you can actually be criticised and leave that behind and still strive to be better and ask for help to be better, because that's what a coach does effectively. And so it doesn't matter how I look at my life. If I break down absolutely anything 100 times a day, it goes back to what I learnt with swimming.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing you touch on now is the chronic, because a lot of people think that chronic fatigue is what you...
Yeah, they think that I stopped at that point.
You stopped at that point. But so back then, we didn't really know a lot about chronic fatigue. So, and because people don't... You came back. I came back
twice, actually. And one of those times I actually got really sick again. And that was because, so I had 2.5 years on a wheat-free, yeast-free, egg-free, corn-free, malt-free, sugar-free, beef-free, dairy-free, herb-free, spice-free, caffeine-free diet. And even then was limited by what I could eat. At the same time, so I'd be very careful with acidic foods. Funnily enough, over the years since, Todd's had to be on restrictive diets twice with his health. And to me, they've just been like an absolute piece of cake. Anyone who has food intolerances, I'm your girl to come to, because I can cook for anything. Because to be such a young age and have those kind of restrictions, it was pretty full on. But I used to also sleep with a heart rate monitor on. And we made a decision when I was first coming back in, got myself back to a point where I could train again. They had changed the backstroke turns to what they are now, which you used to touch a wall, turn around and push off, whereas during that period when I was cook, you turn over, you almost do a freestyle turn.
Yep.
And so I had been practicing them in the pool, but I hadn't been practicing them in racing. And yet my heart rate monitor in the morning that I woke up of a swim meet was like way too high. So we knew internally something wasn't great, and that's how we would measure each day. And so we decided to race, and I ended up with pleurisy and was in hospital within like 2 weeks. And so it was a good lesson to learn, because I was just so devastated, had to pull out of the 92 Olympic trials. And I just went away for 6 months and did not look at a pool. I was told by doctors, look, just give up on the idea of swimming again. And then went back after 6 months and said to my coach, I just had this little part of me just going, what if I am healthy? What if I do everything right and I don't take a risk like that? And we changed our whole training schedule. We became more explosive with our training, as opposed to doing really ridiculous kilometres and the amount of training that we were doing, which was way too much to be a sprinter. And these days they're so much smarter with the sports science that is involved in the sport overall now. I mean, they take it even 10 times more, 100 times more, that to the extreme. But, I did then go back and train again for another 6 months and hit the wall in March at the fastest time of the year, which is not really saying much in March if you're a swimmer. Like, everyone would be like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything, but it's just a nice thing to be able to say, because I hit that wall and I knew I was done.
So, chronic fatigue, when you got that, I know that most people get it from like glandular fever.
Yeah,
were you sick?
Usually I had glandular fever twice, and so that's quite often a precursor, not always, but in the majority of cases it's definitely a precursor. My own personal theory on it, not based on anything apart from my own thing, is that from the second that I made the Australian team, if we so much as sneeze, we'll give an antibiotics. And I think when you have a lot of antibiotics, it's not great for your system. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand there are times when people need to, and they should always be doing it under the guidance of doctors. Mm-hmm. But I think in all the years since I've quit, I think I've only had antibiotics less than half a dozen times in 31 years.
Yeah, right.
So I think I know my system was absolutely shot, and I think that was a big part of it, along with going from not training at all to a lot. I wasn't like one of those swimmers that swam so much the whole way from that being a young child. I had a childhood, and then I turned my attention to swimming. Yep. And so I think a combination of those things were probably what exhausted my system.
And so for you, Joe, is it that you had bone crush, like you felt like you had your bones were crushed? Or what was it?
There's a million different things. So you obviously have the extreme fatigue, but then sometimes when you're trying to rest for the fatigue, you don't actually get a great rest. It's a really broken rest, which is never fantastic. Yep. You ache all over. You have fevers. You have shivers. It's headaches. There's 1,000 different things with it. Like the only time I ever really allow myself to really think about that is when I do things like this. But when you're talking about it, or you've been asked specifically about it, but I think the most confusing thing for people with chronic fatigue, even now, I still get correspondence about it now, but it's very hard for me to give advice for it now, because even a lot of the practitioners that I was under have passed on. So I think the thing that you have to work out your own path to getting better. So mine was very diet-based, but we also I did 1,000 treatments. We went from 6 to 10 hours of training a day to 6 to 10 hours of treatments a day. And when you were telling people this, and we had some universities that were involved in studies, and when you tell people this, they're like, oh, where do I start with that? So the only advice I give now is that you've got to go on your own path, but you're often going to go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you just really learn to listen to your body and learn to listen to like, it's this weird balance. You've got to do some exercise, but you've also got to, sometimes that can be the thing that tips you over the edge at that point. So it's a really difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around. There's a lot more knowledge about it now, a lot more information about it now, but still doesn't matter. Even with all that available, you still find people go 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
So how old were you, Joe, and how were you mentally?
I was 17, which I think most people at that stage think they're pretty bulletproof. I was also making pretty good wage from sponsors at that point. So I think mentally, the part that was amazing for me, like I actually am most grateful for that period in my life out of any other, because I think most people struggle to be with themselves and to learn to like themselves and to be comfortable just with their own company. And I think you see that all the time with athletes who certainly finish after long careers, and that's how they've defined themselves, and then they just struggle to get on with life because the rest of your life is, feels quite mundane compared to those massive highs that you have. Whereas because I didn't have a quick recovery, I learned the first thing about people is if they don't understand something, they just stay away. So I had a big first flush of visitors and everyone trying to be lovely and supportive, and then once they started to work out that you weren't actually getting better in the way that they would hope that you would get better, that just dwindled off. So I probably only had a handful of mates who came that whole year. Lost all my sponsors within a couple of months because for them, they couldn't see an end point to it either. And so it was just an incredibly lonely and confronting time, but also a great one to learn about human nature and a great one to learn about yourself, because the only real way that you could take anything out of any day was to be able to put your head on the pillow at the end of the day knowing that you had done absolutely everything you could to give yourself the best chance of recovery, because it was a full family effort. Like literally my mum was phenomenal through that period, as were my siblings, but it impacted our whole family. So you've got to do the right thing by them, but you've also mainly got to do the right thing so that you can put your head on a pillow and sleep at night. And
for you mentioned that you came back and at 19 you retired, and for you as you were recovering, was that always the goal to get back? And it was 100% the goal, but also it's funny, like it still impacts, like 31 years on from when I retired, I still have so many of the same practices that I really took into my life at 17. So I know if I get run down, I know exactly what to change diet-wise. I know exactly what to do treatment-wise. I know exactly where I go, what I do, all from that period. And I think how lucky I was to figure that out between 17 and 19, when most people, if it hits them later in life, I don't even know where they would even begin to start. And you've got that great thing called youth on your side. So you already have a part of your mind that is going, no, I'm not going to let this define me or beat me. Yeah, and it is, because like you live a very hectic life now. Crazy. It's a crazy... Well, like last week I flew 8 times. And when I was doing house rules, that was a regular week for 6 months of the year. And it's funny because my husband did 2 flights in that week with me. And we got home on the Sunday night and he said to me, I am so exhausted. He goes, it's not even just the flying, it's the getting to the airport. And I looked at him and I didn't say anything, and I just smiled, and he went, are you thinking about those other 6 flights you did this? And I said, see, sometimes, darling, when I come home and I am so exhausted and I can hardly speak, do you understand why? No. He goes, I'm getting a better understanding as we're talking out loud like this. And we were giggling about it because so many weeks are like that. But then the flip side of that is what a great job you have, that you get to be exposed to so much. Better Homes and Gardens, all I do is talk to people who are passionate about what they're doing. So every day is just a delight to go to work. And all the work that I do away from I make sure it's meaningful, and I'm only doing things that I really want to do. And I think that's also something that you work out, as opposed to, I think a lot of people say yes to everything, and they don't realise that sometimes there's a great power in the word no. Absolutely. You're putting your boundary up. You're saying no. I'm very clear on what my boundaries are. I'm very clear on, and that obviously comes with experience as well. But even when we look at the very first contract I did, there were so many things that I set in place at that point. And I can even remember early on, we would have different bosses at different stages, but some that would want you to be an absolute slave to your desk. And I would manage to negotiate with them that I would get there early. I would, do the mad drop off to early daycare centre with the kids, get there early. I would leave early enough to be able to get home to do all the pickups and the dinner. And then I'd say to them, this 3 hours, no one call me, even if there's a disaster. I just don't want to. I'm a mum. Yep. And I had those boundaries even from that young age, and being a young mum, I just knew that I actually had to almost compartmentalise my life to be the very best version of what I needed to be in those moments. Absolutely. And for you, so retiring at 19 and going into, like, what did your mum think? Like, when you said, what was next? What was the plan, Jo?
There was no plan. I said to Mum I was going to work in media, which I didn't realise that's what every athlete, not only says but actually genuinely hopes for. Mm-hmm. But I also realised after so many years how rare those opportunities are, and even if they get an opportunity, very few of them are able to have the length and the diversity that my career has brought. And again, that's come through some of the hardest moments of my life. So I remember being axed by fax. I was pregnant with my second baby. I had a 4-month-old at home, and even though at the time I was like, oh, how cool is that? Because Jess is actually getting to an age where it's quite good fun and it's not just sleepless nights and endless feeding. But because I had only done sport up until then for those first few years, when I got axed, it was like I just had to take a whole lot of jobs. And I don't like walking in front of a room full of people I don't know. Even now, all these years on, I'm not really comfortable doing that. But because I had to, I was doing the most amazing variety of shows on every network. At the Melbourne Comedy Festival, doing live shows down there in front of like a packed Melbourne town hall, and so you just had to put yourself constantly out of your comfort zone. But then out of that came, I guess, the whole second part of my career where I was still able to do the sport, but also have a lot more variety in it because the networks wanted to get some value for money out of me.
And a lot of people wouldn't know this, Jo, and you appeared on Home and Away.
I did. When I was, I think, 17.
And you were playing was it a Swedish?
A Swedish backpacker
backpacker.
trying to steal Bobby's husband. The worst acting you've ever seen in the history of the world.
And you negotiated to keep those rights of those tapes.
I did for everything apart from the master tape.
Right.
So many years later, like we're talking well over 20 years, I think 24 years after I'd done it, or since I'd signed at 7, I woke up on, of all days, April Fool's Day. And this is was become a legendary thing within the industry that it existed. But people who had contacts in tape libraries and contacts at home, where they were like, I will get this, and we would play at the goof reel. No one could ever get the vision because I knew I had it all apart from the master tape. And then they ended up playing Home and Away back from scratch on 7/2. And I woke up one day to somebody I think it was on Twitter, and they put up a screenshot of it, and they went, are you serious? Did Jo Griggs 7 play Inga from Sweden on Home and Away? And I started to hyperventilate. And I started to get the giggles, and I thought, oh no, the caper's up. So we went to work, we were all just laughing and talking about it, and got a phone call at work, and it was the network publicist and the Home and Away publicist, and they said, look, we know it's an April Fool's joke. We know there's no truth in it. We've gone through the records. We cannot find any records of this. But we do need to ask the question: Did you play Inga from Home and Away on Home and Away? And I said yes, I did, and we all just roared with laughter. And then I think the next day I woke up because they just said to me, "Oh, Griggsy, we're going to town on you on this." And I woke up the next day, and the headline in the paper was the front page was Johanna's lost soapy tapes, and so I put a thing out on what was Twitter back then. I said, look, could have been worse, could have been a sex tape, and then got in a lot of trouble for that. But it was worth it.
It's good to see that you can laugh at yourself too.
Mate, I think that's one of the most important things you've got to learn in life. If you can't laugh at yourself, you're going to be in all sorts.
So you mentioned that you had 3 offers when you retired.
Yeah.
And you chose to go with 7. Why was that?
Because they promised me training. They actually did. They legitimately out of the 7, 9 and 10, 7 offered training. And I had enough of an ego. I knew I wanted to do it well, and learnt the first rule of television is that they say anything to get you to sign a contract. But that doesn't mean anything. A contract doesn't mean anything unless it suits them. Yeah. And so I had no training and was awful, just so awful on air. Learnt through public humiliation.
Well, you've changed now. Now you look like an absolute natural, but it wasn't still, like that at the start.
It was horrendous. I was so green, but it does kind of confound me that it still happens to a lot of people, even people who are quite experienced. If they get thrown into a situation they're not used to, everyone has idiosyncrasies, and everyone has little thought words that they use where they're scrambling in their head, or little things that they do, like they might have a tick, or they might clear their throat, or I was so raw and green that everyone got to see everything terrible that I did. But it does surprise me how often I still see it. So I always try to reach out to those people and I just know if somebody could just tell them, as soon as you're aware of those things, you can change it. Best way, even though I hate watching myself back, is to watch yourself back and to watch and learn and ask questions. Like, people get so afraid if they ask a question that they're going to be considered less of. Whereas my bosses, who some of them are still my leading mentors today, they will say I was the biggest pain in the butt because I would come off air knowing I'd been diabolical, and I'd be like, right, show me, tell me what I'm doing wrong, and they'd be like, no, you'll be right. I'd be like, I'm asking you because I want to get better. And so it is. I mean, I'm glad there wasn't social media back then, because I reckon I would have been crucified and probably out of a job straight away. But I also think it's kind of sad that that's what people do when people do make mistakes these days, is that they're just ready to cull them and not give them a chance to actually learn and grow.
I think it's a really key point you touch on there, is that I'm the same. Like, doing this podcast.
Yeah, how much you would have learned.
Oh my God, I listened back to the very first episode and just go, really? Like, I cringe. But every time you do it, you get better.
It gets
and better.
more comfortable and it gets more polished. And
well, you're the 90th episode that I've recorded.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I sit here now and go, wow, when I started to where I am now, and it's more free flowing now. Like, it doesn't, and you learn.
But of course you would learn. I mean, the first one that you would have done, you probably would have had your set questions, and that would be the order that you ask. Whereas one of my biggest criticisms with people when they're interviewing is talk to the person, have a conversation with them. It'll go off on track. If you've done your research, you know how to get it back on track when you need to.
Yep.
But actually listen to what they're saying and let that decide where you're going to go next, because you get a much more free-flowing conversation than if you just go back to that. But when you're starting, you don't know that.
Oh, no, you got to learn.
You go back to, and also you're terrified. You're terrified, and you're not wanting to make a mistake or be foolish in front of the person. So of course you go back down to those things. Yep. So it just comes with confidence and experience.
Absolutely. And for you, so what were some of the early roles that you had in TV?
So I was the youngest and first female sports reader on weekends in Sydney. Mm-hmm. I worked on Sports World, which was a great show.
I remember you on that.
Yeah, when I went back and I hosted that for 6 out of the 9 years that I worked on it. And what was it, 9 years?
That was a great show.
9 years. Oh, it was a cracker. I was just still miss the long form magazine shows where you had time to really let stories breathe, and also showcase athletes where it's not just 30-second grabs on the sideline or something, but actually hear their backstories. And that's why I think the Olympics and the Paralympics, I've always loved all those beautiful emotive pieces that they do, and the amount of work that would go into trying to get the public to have an understanding of those athletes in a very short space of time. But that's the only time you get to do that stuff now. What else did I do? I think that was pretty much my mainstay before I got axed.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
You were axed by fax, is that true?
Yeah.
And which that would not happen today.
Especially on maternity leave and pregnant.
Yeah. So how did this come about, Jo?
Just a change of management. So, which I don't even remember being worried at that time, outside of thinking, that'll be interesting, and wonder where I'm going to get my next paycheck from. But, so much has changed in this day and age that wouldn't happen. But even back then, that was a big enough story. And Alan Jones was very... he was really trying to push it hard, whereas I was just going, no, it's okay, I'm good with it. And also, I kind of feel like you've got to be axed once or twice in your career in media to eventually to have any kind of longevity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's amazing how many people you speak to where that has happened to them. It's happened in quite brutal ways. It is a brutal industry, and they don't always do that stuff well. And I never even met the people who did it. They just came in, they bought the network, change of management, obviously going through the books, going, we can cut money here, cut this one there. And so I, again, out of that initial thing of just going, oh gosh, what am I going to do, to what it led to, I ended up having the first free-to-air pay TV contract, but it was when pay TV was starting out, so they were still happy for you to do all the free-to-air shows as long as you represented Foxtel.
Yep.
And then, you think about that wouldn't happen in this day and age now. So it's just all about timing and luck and opportunities and asking, can we still do this? I mean, some people probably would never even ask the question, but convincing them that it would be a positive thing for them to get more exposure. And then when I was at Foxtel, when Seven then went to Foxtel to ask them if I could do the Sydney Olympics breakfast show. And so that started a negotiation. So even for Foxtel to have allowed me to do that, so they were allowed to announce it for a week. And then 3 weeks out from the Sydney Olympics, they were allowed to promote it. And then during the 3 weeks that we did the breakfast show, and then after that, that pretty much my contract was up at the end of that year, and it just started about a 6 month window or 4 month window of negotiations till the end of the year.
And for you, you've done many Olympics, and we'll get to. I want to touch on the Olympics, but doing your home Olympics, what was that like?
It was epic.
Yeah, it was that.
It was epic. I was working with Andrew Daddo. Seven had sacked some executive not long before, and so we actually did it out of his house, which was right below the Harbour Bridge, looking back towards the Opera House. I mean, you could not believe how beautiful the location was. Everyone, I mean, we all talk about that magic time, and I'm sure it's going to be what Brisbane's going to experience again with the Olympics and what Melbourne did with the Com Games when they last had the Com Games. And certainly if you go all the way back to Melbourne in 56. But, it was a magic time. Everyone was in a great mood. There was no traffic. The whole city embraced it, and they embraced it in a way, a city that's not always the friendliest. People would talk to each other. And then when we first were given the breakfast show, I remember them saying, this could be quite a hard gig, because obviously we knew Roy and HG were going to be doing their show, which was so iconic and epic and just changed the way that sports shows around an Olympics could happen. They were saying that probably all the athletes will want to do the night time. They might not want to do the morning. We knew that they would obviously come on as guests, but it ended up being quite magical because they'd had time to reflect. And so we would have these moments where sometimes they were still a bit inebriated, but you had these great moments where they'd actually had a chance to think about what they'd done. And it was just such, like, it didn't feel like work. You just couldn't believe your luck that you were able to be at a home games in this amazing setting with all these extraordinary honour roll lists, with Andrew Jaddo, who was just such a fun person to work with. Like, we had a ball ourselves. Chris Barth, who's one of my best mates, she was reading the news on our things. She was heavily pregnant, and we struck up a friendship that has still lasted. With us, different networks now. They've bought a farm next to us. We hang out. We have all the same sort of interests away from work. So, a lot of the people I work with, actually 2 people on Better Homes who I work with on that Sydney Olympics. A lot of the friendships I still have in the industry are all people that I work with from that time. And before, like one of my cameramen at Better Homes shot my very first piece to camera. Yeah, right. Another one, like we're just saying farewell to one that I've worked with for 20 years. So I guess I've found the good people in the industry and I've kept them close. And so I'm pretty lucky I only get to work with great people now.
And like, I remember I was 8 years old, Joe, and I remember,
so young.
I remember Kathy winning gold
Amazing.
In the 400.
With all that pressure.
I remember Bruce commentating on that beautifully, who is a great mentor to you.
Absolutely.
And I remember the relay when America said that, and the boys
smashing them like guitars, air guitars.
The air guitar. Like, these are moments that you remember, and I remember these.
Yeah, Marion Jones getting her 5 medals, and there's just so many standout things.
Absolutely.
Even the opening ceremony, like we for the 20 years, Seven put 2 specials together, and looking at the opening ceremony one, like that still stands up now.
Absolutely.
Like it was so beautiful that all the horses coming across the stadium, and you just think
Kathy walking up the stairs, to light
just
the cauldron,
everything. Like it was so epic, and so I think we're pretty lucky that we certainly lived through that, got to see it, got to experience it, and to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Well, that was pretty epic.
And for someone like, I remember that as an 8-year-old and going, wow. And I remember the torch running through the Blue Mountains and get on the way to
and how everyone embraced the torch relay and Greg Norman coming across the Harbour Bridge and it's like there's so many amazing moments.
And you think back and we're still talking about it 23 years later.
And it's still the measure for every games, and I think not only just for us but for lots of other countries as well.
Absolutely. And so let's talk Better Homes and Gardens. You do the Olympics, and then you then become the host of Better Homes and Gardens.
Auction Squad.
Auction Squad first.
So I was still doing sport and tennis. So I'd already done a couple of years of the tennis. actually, that was the other thing I did the first time around was tennis. So I went back to the tennis. I was doing tennis, racing, pretty much all the sport, lots of world champs, Com Games, all the rest. But for the network to make money, they wanted to put me into prime time. And so that was Auction Squad I came back and did. So we did 4 years of Auction Squad, 1 year of House Calls to the Rescue, and then they came to me about Better Homes at the end of 2004.
And was that an easy choice for you to take that?
God, yeah.
And obviously now you've been there, it's what, 20
years next year. Yeah,
wow. And
their show 30 years on air next year,
wow.
Which is unbelievable.
And what is it, Joe, that for you, what do you think the magic is about Better Homes and Gardens?
It's all positive. Right? That's one of the things I'm so proud of. We are never trying to uncover something horrible for people or show a dark side to them. You are just there to celebrate them. They've got great ideas. You're talking to people who are passionate, so people at home, that really connects with them. And you're also talking about what's relevant to a lot of people's lives. And they'll come in and out of the show depending on what ages they're at and what's happening in their own lives. But there's a bit of comfort in it because they kind of know it's a wholesome show, it's a family show. So we have lots of grandparents who sit with grandkids and watches, or parents who sit with their own kids, and you have generations of kids who come up and tell you that's what they did. And I think that's pretty unique and pretty special in current media.
Absolutely.
And it's a big show. It's 90 minutes each week. We've got a cast of thousands of the other presenters, but it's because we only have people who are really passionate and authentic about what they're doing on the show as well. And I think that's why it works. That's why it resonates.
I think, people see it, Joe, that it's only an hour and a half, but what you it takes.
That's like 19 stories. And then sometimes I'm doing state-specific stories, and then we've got all our international things. So it's a big beast. I think most people underestimate it until they actually come and work on it, and then they're like, oh my gosh.
And one of the stories that you and I actually have a connection to is the story you did for World War II veteran David Trist.
Yes.
And that was... David's just an amazing man, and
unbelievable.
what he did for this country, and he just goes, what struck me when I interviewed him was, I'm a normal person, Adam.
Yeah.
I was just, and it's like,
what you did wasn't, you actually went above and beyond.
Yeah, you did. You went through hardships. That I think today we actually think we're doing it hard, but they did it harder than what we did. And
way harder.
What was that like for you?
Oh, look, it was amazing because he's such a humble human being, and he does even so much within the community on about 100 different levels. And we could actually do something to help him. So his wife has dementia. He's still full-time caring. He's in his 90s. He's got the most incredible recall, and that brain is as sharp as a tack. But not a man who asked for help. And so it was so nice for us to be able to do something to help him because he'd had a fall, he hurt his back, and he loved his garden and was so proud. Like, the house was covered in the most amazing greenery wherever you look. Yep. But he was really struggling to maintain it. So it was just, that's one of the other great things. Like, you actually get to help. We don't get to do as much as you would love to because they're expensive, those episodes to do. But you are able to give back and highlight people's stories like that. Another one was Red Shard, who's incredible as well. And these are people who would probably be prepared to cut off their own arm before they'd ask for help. And yet it's not them asking for help, it's somebody who's nominated them that we're able to then go and do something nice for. It's just a beautiful, and they're the ones that they affect the whole office, because the whole office gets involved and they're all there digging, helping out and doing it, and often you'll have a cast of thousands for those big reveals at the end, because it's just a really nice thing for them to see and experience as well.
Well, there was one story that you did a few years ago, and I know there was a unique furniture person, and he tragically passed away, and you were only there a couple of months before, and then it was like you say, these stories of people that they touch you.
100% they touch you. And the thing is, we get exposed to people from all walks of life. It's not a judgmental show, so you can go into somebody's home who they might be mortified about because they might be hoarders, and that in itself is a psychological condition. The show doesn't judge. You just go out and you're able to do really nice things for people. And if you're not doing nice things for them, you're getting to tell their stories and share it. Or, we've got these amazing chefs on the show. You've got amazing horticulturalists and gardeners. I mean, Graham Ross has been there since the pilot.
Wow.
And he's such a revered person in the world of horticulture, and his knowledge is phenomenal. And then you've got Melissa King, who started a couple of years ago, and she's probably the only person that I've seen like Graham who can just pull out any plant and just give you the full history, the proper botanical name. Like they're amazing. And Harry's the same. I mean, if you got Harry, we cut down Harry's pieces that'll go for like 40 minutes because he literally just does a vet consult, and then you're like, Harry, we just need 2 minutes. But you also kind of have to let them go when they're just like legends of the industry.
Absolutely.
And so we were fantastic with them through COVID because we protected the older people that were on our show. But then that's again the beauty of the show. We only have people who work on the show who care about people in the same way that I do. And so you only have this awesome production team. And I think even the behind the scenes people, when you have people on camera, but you have everything that's involved with the show and everyone's experience from that very first phone call, all have that same philosophy. I'm sure that, to me, I believe that translates through on camera.
It does, because, and as you said, it's a positive show because there's so much negativity in the world and in the media. The Better Homes is you're safe.
Bit of comfort.
And you can sit on a Friday night, turn on the TV at 7:30, and there's Joe's beaming beautiful face, and it's like, and it is. You sit down and. I've watched it religiously since I was a little kid. My parents, they
I hope you watched it from 7 p.m. because that's what time it starts now.
7 p.m. Sorry. Sorry.
I'm joking. It used to be 7:30.
It used to be 7:30. 7 now. 7. Yes. So you got me there, Joe. but it is. It's such a warming, and you feel it. You beam through the happiness and joy that.
But I think all the presenters do, because they all love what they're doing, and that's even nice. Just that you have people who are really happy. We certainly felt that through COVID. And COVID for a lot of people, not necessarily overall in Australia, you would say we're not really great at talking about death, and there's lots of cultures that are now coming to Australia where they actually make a real celebration about death. But for a lot of people, the first time that they were hearing death counts was every single radio break, TV break, and they were hearing death counts, state versus state, and country versus country, and global death counts. So for a lot of families, that was a really hard time because kids are asking a lot of questions, and I know that from the work I do with Beyond Blue. And I think there was definitely, we had a lot of feedback that people were just really happy to be able to turn on something that was positive. And even we did lots of stories that were around people whose lives were impacted by COVID, but we made a real conscious effort to find the people who'd had to pivot their life, which was almost every person.
Yep.
And turn it into a positive, so that they were hearing something positive in the world that related to COVID without it being a death count or an illness count or a horrible story, because the media news loves to sensationalise, and they actually, it kind of kills me a little bit because they do play on the people who are the most scared and the most worried. They play into that and exacerbate it enormously.
Absolutely, and that's the, as you say, that's the downside of media. It's the
sensationalism and the quick.
We've got to sell a story.
And clickbait, how ridiculous a headline they can get to get people to.
As yours is different. Yours is
ours
the joy.
is just all about just joy, and that's actually why. I can remember years ago, back when we had Ansett, and I was asked to read the Ansett.
I remember
news,
Ansett, yeah.
Right?
First plane I ever flew on, Joe, actually, was
there
Ansett.
Ansett. So back in the good old days.
Back in the good old days.
But I can remember the first bulletin that I did, and this was when I just started, and they were like, so Johanna, you are sounding a little bit too happy here, because I was so excited they were asking me to do it, but of course the content that I was reading didn't really equate to me being a smiley, happy person. And so that was actually why originally we made a call to go into sport, because most stories in sport are positive, and even if there's terrible stories where people go off the road, there's usually stories of redemption, so you can find a positive. So that was partly why I went into sport so heavily at the start.
And
Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show.
Away from Better Homes and Gardens,
Yep.
you are an Olympic host, and you were the first female solo host,
Yeah.
and I
Well
got that
done.
right. Yes. And what do you love about hosting the Olympics?
Well, I use my brain because I've done by that point. I've done my research, and not just the Olympics. I say in every breath I take, I say Olympics and Paralympics, because I was fortunate enough to work on 3 Paralympic Games, and just if I could do that for the rest of my life, I would happily give up everything else to do it. Like I love it. What do I love about the Olympics and the Paralympics? It's you are trying to do, in a very short space of time, a service to the athletes. So they're trusting you with their stories to tell these amazing moments, sometimes incredibly challenging moments, and you are trying to do justice to them. So I love the challenge of the research that I do in the lead up, which is enormous. I love the fact that it's live. Like I still have it in my head, like 30 seconds increments from swimming. I can do a countdown. I don't use an auto cue. I can do a countdown.
I've heard they're terrible.
To the second, literally to the second, because I've always got that clock going in my head from the days in the pool. Another thing that helps you from the pool. But you have all these different factors that people aren't even aware about, and it is just it's so fun and so challenging. So actually. One of my favourite directors contacted me recently. He'd heard another podcast, and he was saying, some of the stories I think about when I think about you are these. And I remember sitting next to him one day, and because I talk a lot, I was just chatting to him about, Maria Peckley, who she was in Taekwondo, and so she was going for this thing, and I was chatting away to Woz about her story, and it was quite a full-on story with their child, and I was going, and he was just being polite, but he was just like doing his one finger tapping, just going, and he's just like, he didn't tell me till later, he was in his head, he's just like, shut up so I can do the rundown. But I was like rabbiting on about Maria Peckley, blah, blah, blah. And then when all of a sudden she got into medal contention, and so literally they go, quickly, and you have like no notice with these things. And they're like, get down to the thing. So we madly wrapped up the sport we're in, and we threw into her going for a medal. And then basically there's just this silence down the thing, and he says, he goes, Joe, down my earpiece, he goes, you won't believe this, the commentators have gone to the wrong mat. And he said, I need you to come back, and I need you to very calmly take a breath and tell me that Maria Peckley story on air that you were telling me this morning. It was judo, not taekwondo. And he said, I need you to tell that story, because we need to have time to get the commentators around to the correct mat. And so it just sort of came back on. Everyone's like, what's it coming back on camera for? And I've just taken a deep breath, and I've started to tell this story, and this amazing thing about how the judo community had helped her and her husband get to the games, and it was all about her, and to give support for the family, and so we're right through this whole story. And by the point where I'm thinking, I am really stretching this story out of this one. And then down my earpiece, they just go, keep going, please keep going, just give us 30 more seconds, they're almost in there, they're plugging in now. And then it was like, and go, and it was just like right at the commentators. And then like what people don't see is where everyone just like, we collapse on the table in fits of laughter, because we've only just got there by the skin of our teeth.
Everyone thinks it looks fantastic.
Yeah, that's like, so easy.
But
it's just like literally, you never know what's going to happen.
And to me, what I take away from that is be prepared. Be prepared for the
Well, it happens constantly. Or the tennis, if Rafael Nadal would win, he would take like so long to get up to where we were in the commentary at the hosting box, that sometimes it would be 20 minutes.
Wow.
Because he would just be, and we'd have no more ad breaks to go to, and you also knew if you went to an ad break, anyone who's watching is going to flick off. So you would just be talking and just recapping their life, and then you'd see him duck off into the toilet, and you'd be like, Rafa, no!
Just get off here. And for you, Joe, who's the greatest Olympian that you've ever met?
Don't know, there's quite a few of them. Paralympians, I would put Curtis McGrath up there. Kurt Fearnley, Dylan Alcott. There's so many great stories. Olympians, gosh. I've been lucky to work with Thorpe a lot. We never thought we'd see another Thorpe, and then Michael Phelps came along and did what Michael Phelps did. That's the beautiful thing with sport. There's always someone to sort of step up. But to be honest, you could go back to your Dawn Frasers and go back to that previous era. I don't know. There's probably too many to just list as far as... I even think about I've got absolute mind blank on his name. Andrew, basketball, Gaze.
Oh, Andrew Gaze,
right?
yep.
And then you think about all the Olympics you watched him play in, but then I think about how I've got to know him as a commentator, and then, when we finally go in for a bronze medal match and you have these amazing moments where he's so emotional about what it means to the sport. And I don't know, sometimes it's not just what the athletes are doing at the time, it's what they've gone on to do as well, which is always interesting.
And you're someone that you're kind, caring, you give your time to people, like you said, you only engage now in things that you want to do and give your time to people. And like I say, I'm honoured to be sitting across from you, and it's we have back and forth for a long time to get this, and I knew I just played the waiting game. I knew that a time would come where we'd be, and you've helped me so much. And for you, you've met some sporting superstars, but in the tennis world, who's the one tennis player that you love?
Roger's hard to go past, just because he, thing that people forget with tennis is, they might see an athlete, and it might be one of our own athletes, and they see them getting really short and shirty in press conferences. When you see their life, it is so relentless. I think most sports people's lives are a little bit relentless, but tennis is on such a level. It's like, I guess it would be the same as like the F1, or I guess any of that really top echelon, or the cricketers when they're going overseas for a tour. The questions and the amount of questions and the way they've got to front up to the media, and yes, they have a wonderful life and they get paid handsomely for it. But for someone like Roger, every single day, it's like some of the questions are so inappropriate, but he just was always so classy. And he didn't start out like that. He was pretty bratty when I started out in tennis. He was one of the ones that had probably as big a temper tantrum as any other players that I'd seen, and he would lose his cool regularly. So he kind of developed into this amazing statesman of tennis. And I think that was the evolution of him, and where he sort of elevated tennis to on a global scale. And I mean, there's some unbelievably talented tennis players coming through now, and there is definitely an argument about Novak, who's the greatest. If you're looking in terms of Grand Slams, if you really want to have that argument, you could go back to Ken Rosewall and look at all the years that he missed out on. But it's always hard to compare generations. Just of that generation to have had the big four, as they were called, and watching the way they handle themselves. There is a reason why. I actually love Novak, but there are a lot of people who he's very divisive for, and that comes down to not necessarily what he's done on the court, but how he has acted off the court. And yet what I see is off the court is how generous he is with his fans and how fantastic. But for some reason, there are some people who will argue till they've got no breath left in them almost about why Roger's better than Novak. And it comes down to the likability. And it was just Roger had this great ability to transcend that in a way that everyone liked him. And
I agree. I love Novak too, and people say, oh, the Joker and
he's fantastic.
Yeah,
he is phenomenal.
And he's the way he came back from injury and
the dedication with his diet and trying different things. But I look at all of them, like that era, like how lucky were we, when I was first hosting, Jim was playing, Jim Career was playing, and so you had Pete Sampras, and you had so many players that
Andre Agassi,
like you never thought you were going to see that again, and then of course you then go to this era that we had the big four, and then in amongst that you've had some great Australians. Like it was such a sensational time to be involved in the sport.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate all of them, is what I'm trying to say. I don't understand why you have to have just one favourite player.
They're all.
That's why when you say which is your favourite Olympian, it's hard. It's actually hard because they're all special for different things at different stages.
Absolutely, and for you, how do you, Joe? Like obviously you've been in the industry for 30 years now, and it's, as we've said, there's the
coming up to 31.
Oh, coming up to 31. So. How did you deal with the negativity that was said about you in the early days compared to now?
Same way that I still now, because you still get it. First of all, you have to understand one thing. Not everyone's going to like you. End of story. Not everyone's going to like the way that you walk, talk, what you wear, how you hold your hands, how your voice sounds. I mean, there's lots of that I look at and I just cringe at as well. But to be perfectly honest, I am not doing it to try and keep everyone happy. I guess I'm lucky I have a job I love, and this has always been my attitude. I've always given my absolute all, and I've always tried to make great environments for the people that I'm working with, and I really work hard on that. But that's not how I measure myself. The way that it's very easy to leave negativity behind is because it doesn't actually impact my life. Even when the times where it's blown up with different things at different stages where you are absolutely being targeted by trolls. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. And I can say that because I've had a lot of experience. But for somebody like on a reality show that's coming in, that can be overwhelming. For me, do you know what happens? I close the door. I talk to my husband, my kids, my family and my friends. And they are not caring less about whether or not you're targeted by trolls. And I think it's a really important thing for anyone who's starting out to learn. That's not going to define you. And it's not going to, if I don't define myself by that, well, then that's it. I define myself by how well I treat people, how great a wife, mother, friend I am.
Nana, yep.
Nana. But it comes down to those things that actually mean and impact your everyday life. If I want to be a good peer, I want to be a good co-worker. I want to foster great relationships in our production team. I want to look after the people I work with. And then I feel like I can put my head on a pillow and sleep.
Well, I think that's the great point you touch on is because throughout the nearly 31 years, I'm saying 30, so 30 years, you've worked with some amazing people.
Yeah.
You've had some amazing mentors, and we've mentioned one of them,
Yeah,
Bruce.
Brucey, yeah.
Bruce. Who are some of the others, and how have you tried to pay forward what you've learnt from those mentors to the new generation?
Look, I look after every person who contacts me that's starting out in media, and I mentor them as much or a little as they want. I have meetings. They will send me tapes. They will ask me for advice. They can spend hours on the phone being upset. When I was doing house rules, I would spend up to 6 hours a day when the show was on air, just helping. People. Everyone says they sign up for a reality show. I think. Maybe there's some reality shows where people might have an expectation what they're going into, but I don't think when people sign up for a home renovating show that they expect that they will be absolutely crucified both in the edit and in the public's reaction. And so I try just to help people navigate that, and I'm happy to give as many tips and advice to anyone who's starting out, because I do believe that there's enough work for everyone. So I've never understood this mentality that you've got to protect your domain and you're competing against everyone else and you can't possibly help them because what if they get your gig, right? I've never had that mentality. To me, there's plenty of work for everyone, and in actual fact, I guess I've got so many great friendships because I've helped so many people. Other mentors, so Bruce McAvaney, definitely a huge one for me, but also like Sandy Roberts was amazing. Andy Kay, who was one of my first bosses,
Yep.
I still call him at the drop of a hat. He recently retired after 40 years at Seven, and I still would speak to him every couple of weeks. And, sometimes it's for advice, sometimes it's to offload about something or just to ask a question as to how he would navigate something. And I've done that pretty much since I started. And there's lots of others, like I guess people like Barthy, Michelle Kieran is somebody else who I've worked with. We've worked with each other for the full 31 years. She started at Seven, I think, a couple of years before I even did. But anyone who reaches out, I figure part of what I would love to see more in television is more of that. When I started in TV, we used to do work experience, and you'd have people come and do work experience, and they do stints in the office. That doesn't happen anymore. It's very rare they even have somebody out for a day, and I just think it's such a shame. Like, how are they ever going to know what they want to do? They should be able to still have those programs in place so they can work out where they might like to put their energy, because there's very few who'll end up on camera. But they might also be able to contribute in another way. But how are they ever going to know that if they don't get exposed to it?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's, as you say, TV it's a brutal industry.
It's brutal.
And in that 30 years, how has it changed, and what more needs to be done to make it better?
How long have we got? Look, it's changed. It has changed enormously. I still think television hasn't quite come under the scrutiny that some other industries have, in terms of behaviours and dealings. Like some of the stories over the years that I could tell of the dealings I had would not be tolerated in any other workplace. It's still tolerated in television. Having said that, I've also had some of the greatest people amazing conversations. So there is good and bad in there, but I still think there's still some dinosaurs there, and there's still that old school attitude that definitely needs to shift. But having said that, it has come an enormous way. So I say it's a work in progress, the whole industry, and it's changing like rapidly. Even just the way we consume media and what's ahead for media and how it's going to look like. That's quite fascinating to think about what it might look like in 5 years' time.
Absolutely, and it is like with AI and all how it's all changing and the world is going forward at a rapid, and so is the media world.
Well, someone the other day we were having a Zoom. This is not in media. This was for one of the other jobs that I did. Was telling me that somebody logged on with AI. They got an AI to take notes of the meeting, and it was just by pure accident that the AI sent out a summary of the meeting to everyone, as opposed to the person who put them. And I thought, oh my gosh, like just even thinking about that. So you can't even really trust that someone who's logging in with a name is that person necessarily. Like there's a lot to think about in terms of.
It's scary that we're out. I think we're going to get to a point, Joe, where we're actually going to outsmart ourselves. And I really think about iRobot. That comes to mind. Will Smith.
Great.
That's a great movie. And I think, someone could put a bug in and
100%.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's a really, from even the short time that since I left school, and that's 13 years ago, nearly 14 years ago. Jeez, so there you go.
That must be so hard.
It is. But I think of the growth and the change that we've had from when I was 15 to now 30.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's just we've come so, and in TV, like how far you've come from the old cassette tapes. And
they're changing technology now and the cameras that they're using. And I mean, they're lighter, but they have so much more things that you can actually do in the edit booth without having to do 1,000 takes. And like the quality of a phone camera these days. There are shows that are shot on phone and bits that go. And COVID, I think, for everyone in media was good and bad in the sense that, yes, they had to adapt, but all the hours that we obsess over making pictures look pretty, it was extraordinary to see what people were happy to accept and not really be concerned about during COVID. So that shifted things significantly.
It's a changing world, world. So I mentioned at the start of the podcast that you're on Beyond Blue as a director.
Yep.
Let's talk about this, and I know this is your most passionate, the work that you love doing the most. And how did this come about, and what do you do with Beyond Blue?
I was a director on another company called Events New South Wales, which is now Destination New South Wales. So I did that for a couple of years, and so I'd had some exposure to being a director. But I'm a board member for Beyond Blue, and it came about Jeff Kennett, who was our founder, and he was our chairman for 21 years. We had a chance flight with each other, and at that stage a lot of athletes were going off the rails, and he couldn't wrap his head around because he loves his sport, and he couldn't work out why. And I think a lot of people couldn't work out why, and so I just gave him a whole lot of insights into things, and I kind of knew after that he would probably see if I was interested, but it actually took him a while. It took him about a week and a half, and he rang me and he said, "You are a very difficult lady to get in touch with." And I started laughing. I'm like, "Aren't you on the board of Channel 7? And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in the 7 directory. Not that hard." I'm like, "That makes me worry about you." But we obviously got on well, and then he invited me down to observe the board and to see if it was something they wanted to be a part of. And I love it. I love one, I feel like we actually do pretty extraordinary work, that organisation. I've been a director for 9 years, and I've just been extended for another 2 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Never happened before.
Not for that length of time. It has happened before, but not for that length of time. I initially was quite overwhelmed with the people around the table that we have. But I now, over time, have worked out my worth with Beyond Blue, and I chair the National Advisory Council for BU, which is the early learning services right through to the end of Year 12. So it's the only program that goes from 0 to 18. We're in 75% of schools across the country. We're in less percentage in terms of early learning services, but it's a massive number because there's obviously some early learning services have big organisations. Sometimes it's just a stay-at-home care, so it's much broader what we can do. But I feel like now even with that program, but other stuff that we've put forward, obviously you do make a difference. And I hear it all the time. Like, people come and tell me all the time where Beyond Blue has helped them or helped someone that they know or someone that they love, and it's saved their life. And it's pretty powerful to be involved in an organisation like that. Amazing purpose.
And for you, well, I listened to you on another podcast, and that's how I contacted you, and I told you before this went to air is you were the very first person I reached out to share my story, and I reached out and said, Joe, would you read my story of attempting suicide and all the challenges? And you were the very first person that gave me a testimonial, and I thank you for that. And it was because of hearing the work that you do with Beyond Blue that's why I reached out to you, because it's a cause close to both of our hearts, that we want to help people.
Well, I think the thing with mental health, and this is what I say to people, is obviously I've learnt so much in the time that I've been a director, but for most people, I think they just hear buzzwords and they think mental health and they think, what well-being and emotional well-being, all the rest of it, until someone they know is impacted, whether it be anxiety, depression, whether it be suicidality. And all of a sudden everything changes, whether it's workplace bullying, and they watch how the impact that can have on not only productivity but their everyday lives. And it's, they take that home and they're dealing with it every minute of every moment outside of work. So all of a sudden then their blinkers are off, and then they want to know where to get help and how to get help and how do you have those conversations. Now, I've obviously learned so much so that I've actually been able to help out a lot of people that I have come across and that I have worked with, who I'm recognising in them signs that they're not even aware of yet. And then I've been able to sit down and have those conversations, get permission off family members for me to broach it with them, and then get them the help that they need, and then watch them flourish. Because I think the really, really important message with mental health that is so necessary to get out is it doesn't have to define you. And that most of it, if you can get, there's always going to be a percentage of a chemical change that is going to require medication, or I say to people, even with medication, try different medication. If you haven't got a psychologist that you're comfortable talking to, go speak to another psychologist. It's the same as making sure you're comfortable with the doctor. But it is actually about short stop gaps for you to get the toolkit to be able to take control of your life and actually have it in your rear vision mirror. But it's just about what you need to know and what steps you need to take, and when you can recognise in yourself that you're spiralling. And that's all stuff that I've learned through the work that I do. And so I feel like it is a gift on a number of fronts. One, because we can make a change, we can make a difference, but two, because you can actually also use that skill set to help people, and you have a lot of more empathy and understanding, and you learn to be non-judgmental, because that's really important for people who are around anyone who's suffering from mental health condition. Is they need support, and they need non-judgment, and they just need sometimes just someone to listen.
Yeah, and it is that everyone's good when the ball's bouncing in their court, and it's
when it's hard.
When the cards are going for you and everything's easy. And it's when everything's against you. And I recently had a chat to Damien Tomlinson about this, and he said the same thing. He goes, mate, it's when you got to do the inner work and you got to look in, and there's some really ugly truths that you need to confront, and a lot of people don't want to do that, Joe. They go, it's too hard, but I think it's necessary. You have to do it if you want to break free and, like you're saying, shine again.
Get the toolkit and take little baby steps, and then eventually the overwhelming. I mean, certainly with depression, a lot of people just talk about it as that a fog, like the heavy dark fog. And eventually those days will become less. But it's about giving people hope. And I was talking the other day with a former police commissioner who was one of the first ones in Victoria to come out talking about his mental health struggles. And he was saying to me how upset he was that he gets called courageous. And I said, but that's because you have in your mind what courage means. And so you might have very set parameters as what you think makes up the word courageous. But by you talking out, what you actually did is you gave other people the courage to go and get help. So you took that first step. But for most people, that's the hardest thing for them to do, is to take the first step. And most people don't like asking for help. But once you do, boy, it feels like the easiest thing. And you go, why didn't I do that 3 years ago?
Well, I think for me, Joe, it's very much I advocate for every podcast I do that anyone that listens, it's not weak to speak. Put your hand up and actually, it's a sign of strength that you're admitting, you go, hey, this has got too big, I need help. And my psychologist said to me was, Adam, it shows that you've grown and it's a sign of strength that you're going. And I'm okay, and for me, I'm okay to talk about it now because I've been through it. And people ask me, they said, oh, what was your hardest chapter to write in the book? Surely you... And I went, no, it wasn't. The hardest chapter to write was my chapter of my substance abuse and telling my parents that... And that only came 6 months ago, Joe, that I told them that I was struggling with substance abuse and alcohol and I was in fear of the shame that I would put onto them and they brought me up to be this... And that was the hardest chapter. But speaking up about it, I'm not that person anymore. And it is. I look at it and go, the growth that I've had was because I put my hand up and said, I'm in trouble.
See, I find there's part of me that I think because sport, again, we were in the year, we worked with sports psychologists, right? So every time, what about we started, you're in the shade, now you're in full sun, you're getting burnt. Sorry, I just realised the news is like, I'm feeling burnt. So every time that I was struggling in the pool, I would go speak to a sports psychologist. So when my marriage first broke down, the first thing I did was go and speak to a psychologist because I was feeling really overwhelmed. I didn't even think twice about it. And every other time, whenever I'm overwhelmed with anything, I go and speak to a psychologist and it just gives me clarity. And I say to people, they don't give you answers as such. You've got to find the answers. But it's just like clarity for me. So sometimes I can just be feeling overwhelmed with 1,000 things and might just... Pardon me, be a simple question about, okay, well, what would you prioritise if I asked you to do it? I've never had even a moment's hesitation. And I remember when I stood up at the launch of BU, so that we had our first discussions about it in 2017, it started in 2018. And I just talked about that at the launch. And so many people came up to me afterwards, they're like, aren't you embarrassed that you said that? And I'm like, no, because to me it's just a tool in my kit that I use when I need to. Yep. And I said, I didn't even think about that. And I said, because to me that's just part of what I do. But you realise for some people it is that they worry about shame or they worry about the stigma. I think that's changing over time as more people talk about it. But it's, again, I don't even think about going to a psychologist because I know it helps me get clearer in my head.
And I've recently done it myself where I was struggling a bit in some of the things that I recently was deployed on last year with the floods. And I was struggling and I just went and saw the psychologist for an hour and he said, Adam, you've been journaling about everything else. Why don't you journal? And I went home that night and journaled for 2.5 hours and what I was feeling and I felt better. And it was just, and every 3 months I just go and get that check. And it's
just like a medical check-in, getting your blood test done.
And I know now my journey and like you're saying, the tools in the toolkit and my tools aren't necessarily going to help everyone, but they might just help that one person. And what I've learned along, and some things I've done, I go, well, that didn't work. I need to find something else.
Absolutely. And people say to me, another part to it, they say, I don't really understand that. I say to them, go on our forums. Go and read some of the streams on the forums because it'll help give you an understanding of whether it be a sibling or a friend or a peer. Try and just see it with a different lens so that you actually can not have that reaction when they're talking to you. So just get an understanding of what they're going through. Show some empathy. Show some kindness. You'd be amazed how far that can go.
Absolutely. And for you, what are some of the... Obviously, we've mentioned COVID, and what are some of the things that have come out of COVID that you've noticed with BU for the younger...
Look, there's huge things. We're going to be feeling it for years. And not just that. People, it's easy to forget in light of everything that's happening in the world. But you think about the natural disasters that were just year on year on year. So, bushfires, floods, COVID, sometimes floods, bushfires through COVID. On top of that, you look now what's happening at the moment and you just go, honestly, wars around the world, what people are seeing and images, like all of that has an accumulative effect. And some people will just coast through life and it won't have any impact. But other people, and there can be a million different triggers and a million different things that they're seeing. And certainly for kids, like I was talking before about death counts, images that they're seeing, images that they're exposed to, social media, the bullying and the trolling on social media. At the moment, we're seeing school refusal is a massive issue, and even even just the way that they're interacting, because for a while there they were everything was done on Zoom, and became very easy for kids to turn cameras off and say their cameras were broken. You know, teachers were under this enormous pressure to be all of a sudden adapting the entire way that they were teaching. So there are a lot of lingering issues as a result of that. The yes referendum, that was one of the most divisive things in this country, sadly. And there are lots of schools that are reporting back to us that's still an issue. There's lots of people who are feeling really isolated in the communities. They might not have felt that before. They might have had moments where they felt it before, but some of them looked up results in their little communities and worked out how few people were supporting them, and now walk around going, who's on my side and who's not. So there's always a plethora of things, but COVID particularly, the isolation that a lot of people felt, for a lot of people being at home wasn't the safest place. Everything went to online. A lot of people don't have access to online, and when you do have easy access, it's very easy to forget that. A lot of homes might have been in a low socioeconomic area with several kids, and what are you going to do? All of a sudden have internet access and devices for all those kids to learn from? I mean, there were just so many parts and so many factors to it that were really difficult.
Well, I think too, and you mentioned social media, when I was going through, and I was bullied in the playground, my safe haven was I could go home and not be targeted, and social media has come into that now, and the poor kids today, that
it's relentless.
It's relentless. They have it at school, and then they have it on their phone. They have it on the way, and
let alone the images and things that they can be looking up, even with parental locks on it. The ways that kids can find it, and you only also to look recent things, major events, whether it be referendums, whether it be around war at the moment. The way that they're targeted through the various apps that they're using is quite frightening, and that's not anywhere near the level of being policed that it should be. There's lots of talk about it, but it's still readily available. So it's what they're exposed to as well, which is really worrying.
Well, look at your own boys. Like, they went through it at a different time. I went through it at a different time, and now, as we were saying at the start before we jumped on and recorded, we look at we always go for the negative. It's never, there can be 15 positive messages, and then there'll be one negative message,
and that's what people think about, and they obsess over it. And when they're getting 15 negatives and one positive, then you're heading into dangerous territory.
Absolutely. And so there's more work. So you're there for another 2 years, and so what are the plans going forward with Beyond Blue?
Well, to be honest, I think the reason why they extended me was because we're at such an important part with BU. We've just in the last lot of funding, we've got 4 years, which is the longest amount of funding that we've got, which sounds bizarre, but to be able to have that surety for the people who are doing the delivery on the ground is really, really important. It's shaping our council, it's getting them to be more proactive, and they're already fantastic ambassadors, but we're probably having the biggest evolution of BU now, because as opposed to having to reach criteria and numbers, which we had to in our first years to guarantee funding, we've now got this breathing space to really plan and embed it so that the one that teachers don't see, incorporating a whole school community mental health approach is actually more work for them, that it'll actually ultimately be less work for them, but it will also help improve, like we're seeing some amazing results. It's helping to improve results in students. So if you have a really happy, supportive, it makes sense when you come from where we're coming from, when you have an environment that is safe, happy, supportive, encouraging. I think there was a little school that we did the very first launch who had previously been a Kids Matter school. And so when BU came in, it incorporated 5 existing programs and then had this idea of being this incredibly adaptive program that could adapt to natural disasters or adapt to a little tiny school on the Northern Territory. So it has to have this flexibility. And at Monmere Public School, I always remember the principal was asked by a member of the press, and they said, we picked that because we knew it was a very mentally healthy school, and the whole school environment was on board and had fantastic action leaders and parents who were supportive and teachers who had the language and knew what to do. And she couldn't remember the last time that they'd actually had an issue to deal with, because the last 2 previous issues had been brought up by peers of kids in primary school who were recognising signs where other children were struggling and hiding it. And then they went to the teachers had the conversations, could have the conversations with the family and get the right support for those children. So if you could have every school doing that, if you could have an entire mentally healthy generation where they think about mental health in the same way that they do physical health, that's our lofty goal. We've got a lot of work to do to get it there, but we are seeing such promising results already. And I guess that next hurdle is really embedding it so it just becomes part of everyday practice and actually relieves the pressure. Because at the moment, like, educator wellbeing is a huge issue. They've also been through all that with COVID, and they have been dealing with so many things. Let alone often it's not necessarily all the big schools in the big cities. You're talking about the teachers that are looking after way too many students in their classes, and they're out in tiny little communities, and they're feeling isolated. So there's so many parts to it, but I do feel like we're on a great path, and at the moment we're probably on the best path. We work with Headspace and Early Childhood Australia, who are our delivery partners. So we're in a really great position between the three organisations. We are very clear on what we need to do, how we support the on-the-ground people, and how we can evolve it so it just becomes really embedded, and that we have everyone, teachers and the whole school community, is really engaged.
Well, I think it's a key point you touch on, is that we're fascinated by, we've got to have a six-pack of our abs and our bodies, but mental health is something we need to be our mental muscle. We need to be working on every day.
Yeah.
And it's something that is just passed over. It's like, I've got to have a...
Well, she'll be right. The old she'll be right attitude.
She'll be right
attitude.
attitude.
No.
And people forget too that Beyond Blue, like, you guys have got donations. You've got to get funding. So it doesn't just happen where it's, here's a bucket load of money and go and do.
And look, sometimes it does. Like, we are very generously financed by states and territories and the Commonwealth, because the Commonwealth knows we can deliver. So things like, in the middle of the bushfire disaster, they knew they could come to us. They know that we can scale up programs really, really quickly. But we're also, I think, really good at working with other organisations. So in every mental health reform that's come out, people are sick of the duplication, and they want to see more organisations working together. We are actively doing that, and that has taken time to I guess, foster those relationships where people aren't feeling territorial, and also make us clearer on what we're focusing on and what we're not focusing on, because there might be other organisations who can do some part of it better. So that's been a really big part of the last couple of years, is not trying to be everything to everyone, but work to our strengths. And I think that's actually been probably one of the really lovely things to see how well that's being handled.
Well, I think too, like, and you see it where we've got, Are You OK Day, we've got the World Suicide Prevention Day. And I say it in every post that I do, Joe, is that we shouldn't just do it on one day. We should be doing it every day. And I make a thing.
I can honestly say I am.
But me too.
Yeah.
Like, I do it every day. I check in on 10 people a day, and it's a different... I go through my phone and just check in and just give them a text, and most of them are in shock and go, are you high? Or what's... Because I just give them positivity, because I know what it's like. I've been on the other end of when you're alone and you feel that you haven't got anyone to turn to. It's just to know that someone's there and they care. And that's all it is.
Absolutely.
And I think if that's the message that we can get across, that check in on people every day. Don't just do it on those days.
And also, so often people come to me and they say, I don't know how to have the conversation if there's someone that I'm worried about. And there's so much that you can learn to have those awkward conversations. But I always say to them, have you tried just listening? Just let them talk. And you don't have to say, I know how you feel, because they probably don't know how they feel.
No, that's right.
You don't have to say, it'll get better, because that's the last thing they need to hear at that moment. They actually just need someone to listen to them and not try and not try and tell them how to make it better when they're coming from a place of no knowledge, or so that's the other thing I say to people. Like, sometimes it's great to learn how to have those conversations, and there will be a point where you'll be able to need to help, maybe guide them, point them right through it, be there to support them to get the help that they need. But first and foremost, you don't have to know how to have a conversation to listen to someone.
Great advice, Joe. And I think anyone that listens to this, and be kind, and just
be kind.
Be kind.
Kind goes a long way.
I think treat people the way you want to be treated. I've learnt through my journey and my process to get to here, it's through kindness. It's just, I give more than I expect to receive, and it's, I just treat people the way that I want to be treated.
So I give without any expectation that I'll have it back, which is even a greater way to manage your own expectations, that you'll never be disappointed.
Absolutely. I love that, Joe. That's so good. So What are your plans going forward as with Todd and the kids, and also as a nana and away from and a mother, so away from being a TV personality who you are and a TV star, I'll say. What's your obviously kids and your grandkids are the greatest gift that you've got, and obviously Todd. Yeah. What are your plans going into the future?
To be honest, I think the older that you get, you also you realise how lucky you are if you have health. So if I could have one wish, it would be that they all have great health throughout their life. It would be, the dream scenario would be that we'd have a long and wonderful life together where the kids grow up happy and know how loved they are. And for Jaxie, it's just whatever direction that little boy looks in, he's just got to feel love and support and care. We run a construction company away from it. I think probably when I finally retire, I will be on my farm, feeding my cows, playing with my bees, growing all my veggies, all the things that I do now, but would be able to even have more time. I'm always looking for ways to learn. So last year we did an artificial insemination course for our cattle. I'm about to go and do a butchery course, which I know some people would find horrendous. Having said that, we've got lots of vegans in the family and vegetarians, so I cater for everyone. Again, I don't judge, but to be able to live more off the land in a very simple life. I think the funny thing, everyone imagines that you have this crazy, ridiculous life. Our life is so simple, and it's the simple things that keep us happy, and it would just be that, focusing on the friendships and the people who are important to us, and hopefully living a long and happy life.
So for you, career-wise now, you've, as you say, when you eventually retire, so there's still many...
But did you know what? That might not be my decision. That could be next year. If it is next year, at the end of next year, I just would literally go in, as I've gone into every negotiations, and if they get to a point and they go, all right, we're not redoing this, I'd just go, thank you. Walk out and say thank you. I'd send a note off to everyone who I needed to thank for just the most amazing 31 years. And if something else came up, I would weigh it up and throw it into it if it was something that I was interested in. I've got lots of ideas of things that I could do, but I can't do any of that while I'm on a contract. But at the same time, if I got extended for another couple of years, I'd be over the moon. But I don't go in with any expectation. I don't think I'm owed it. People get so upset when people leave a show, or whether they think it's their decision or a network's decision. It's only ever a job. It's a job I love, and I've had the best time in the world. But I have no expectation or ego to think that the network needs me. Yeah. I'm just a baton holder. That's it.
So, looking back now, Jo, and with everything that you've been through and in your career, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self, and would she listen?
I think she would definitely listen, because by 18 I had almost 12 months on the bed. What advice? I would actually say all the stuff I learned at 17. I would say choose how you live your life. You actually have a lot of say in how you live your life. You can choose whether or not you're kind. You can choose whether or not what your ethics and your morals and your boundaries are. I would say choose carefully, which I think I have done. Stay true to yourself, which I think I have done. Be kind, which I think I have done.
Absolutely.
And to be perfectly honest, I would also give the advice, it's okay to make mistakes. Try not to make the same mistake 1,000 times, but learn from those mistakes. It kind of kills me that society doesn't let people make mistakes anymore, because it's such an important way to learn. So be okay with making mistakes as long as you learn from them. And just try to be able to put your head in the pillow every single night and sleep like a baby, because really the only times that you're not going to be sleeping are when you're not really happy within yourself.
Great advice. I think, absolutely. Be kind. Well, that oozes out of you with kindness. And so...
And also stand up for what you know is right, and if it's wrong, stand up for that too. Absolutely. I think I've always done that.
I think you have, and it is shown with things. And what advice would you give to any young person who is thinking about getting into media?
Oh gosh, first of all, I would say manage your expectations, because it's not like the old days where somebody would be given a chance to get, be able to go and work in the newsroom and see what it's like. I think the hardest part for someone getting into media is you almost have to go almost out to the regional areas to get experience, but even they're shutting down left, right and centre, so those opportunities are few and far between. If you're lucky enough to get that start, don't be afraid to change it if you decide a little way into it that you don't like it and you don't like what it stands for or whatever, because I think most people are afraid of change, but sometimes change, you've got to do it for your own sanity. And I'd say how you start's how you finish, so don't make up a whole lot of rules and then change them 6 months down the track and then wonder why no one respects you. Be very true and honest to yourself and get yourself you get that foot in the door, work your butt off without actually thinking you're going to start at the top, because it just doesn't happen. And even if you start at the top, you're going to get knocked down a few times. And all those people that have helped you along the way, if you're horrible to them, I swear to God, it comes back. I've seen it time and time again. Sometimes it goes very slowly, but the wheels are always turning. Those people, it catches up with them eventually.
Well, they have your whole...
Everyone does.
Everyone does.
Even the person with the smallest job. Like, one of the good things about starting from the bottom, which I've had to do a couple of different times, is that you learn everyone has a job and that none of it actually works without the full team effort. I think that's what I like about our Better Homes production team. There is respect for every person's role. And if you don't respect even the person with what you think is the smallest role, you're bonkers, because they could, at any time, that could come back and bite you on the bum.
Absolutely, and I think it's great advice and for any young person that listens to this is, just remember that there's, on the way up, there's people that are helping you get up, but when you're dropping, and they might not put the hand out on the way down. So
they would do that if you have treated everyone with respect and with the same level of integrity and niceness that you would hope that you would get.
Absolutely. And how do people get in contact with you, Joe, and like if they want to reach out to you?
So if it's for work, my manager, she's a link on my Instagram page, but Sue Muggleton at Cameron's Management. Lots of people contact me via Instagram, but to be perfectly honest, sometimes I go months without checking my messages, so it's not a great thing, but that's about it, really. But usually, people find a way if they want to.
Yeah, and well, I was very... Well, just by chance, I managed to get you, and it was, and I class you as a friend now, Joe. So it's great to call you that, and for all the opportunity that you've had to travel around the world, where's your favourite place to visit in this world?
To visit? Oh gosh, earlier this year we went to Ningaloo Reef.
Ooh, where's that, Joe?
That's like about 9 hours south of Broome. And it's got the most extraordinary reef, beautiful waters. We swam with whale sharks for my 50th birthday with the kids and stepkids and their partners. Snorkeled all day, did gorge walks every morning, got up, watched shooting stars and played charades on the beach. That was pretty amazing. I mean, there's so many places. Like, that's one of the ridiculous things that we get so spoiled with the show. I mean, Alaska was pretty amazing last year. Ireland was pretty amazing this year that I went to. I had never done Ireland or Scotland or Wales, and I can't wait to go back and explore it more. So I think that I love Uluru. I love Broome. I love the Northern Territory. I love far north Queensland. I love Tasmania. I love so many parts of New South Wales and Victoria. I don't want to leave anyone out. South Australia. Got to see them all. Like literally, you can find beauty everywhere. I love exploring our country, but I also love going overseas. I love. Todd loves war history, so a lot of a lot of our stuff when we travel overseas is to actually respect some of the history of the past. But I think wherever you go, doesn't matter where you go, as long as you're learning something.
Absolutely, and I know, as you said, you love your farm, and
that's my favourite.
Away from everything, and Joe on a farm with the cows, surrounded by the kids, the grandkids. Yeah. That's your happy place, and
that's our happy place. That's our happy place. It doesn't matter whether it's pouring with rain or whether it's stinking hot day, or yesterday it was both of those things all at once. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, I grow like 85% of our veggies. We live a very wholesome, lovely life up there. We're able to share it with all our family and friends, and it's just good. I need to be surrounded by nature, and I need to be surrounded by animals. I've worked that out, that's something that I need to balance out the madness of my life, and we're very fortunate we can do that.
Absolutely. And Joe, I want to finish with a quote, and your story is one of true grit, determination, never giving in, and you were a trailblazer, and you've represented your country with honour and brought pride to your family. You're an inspiration to so many, and I want to thank you for what you do for people who are struggling with mental health, and just away from that as well, just the general person that just comes and just wants to have a chat with you. It's been amazing, and I believe this quote sums you up. It's some people come into our lives. Some people who come into our lives are blessings. Some come into your life as a lesson. A life not lived for others is not a life. Mother Teresa. And so, Joe, you are truly amazing, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on True Blue Conversations and giving up your busy schedule, and I know how busy you are. So, Johanna Griggs, AM, thank you for coming on True Blue Conversations and sharing your story. It's been an absolute honour and privilege.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for those very, very, very kind words.
You're welcome. Thanks, Joe.
We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Blum. See you on the front line.